righty. Thank you, Rachel, for agreeing to meet with me and to kind of share about your experience with implementing the SHARP framework in your agency. So, as we're getting started, do you want to share what your job title is and sort of a little bit about you as a person?
Okay. So my name is Rachel Maconachy, and I'm the director at the Arundel County Department of Social Services. And first, I want to thank you for even inviting me to interview me. As a person, I am feeling a little nervous, wanting to make sure that I say the right thing, that I get the right message out. Um, so I will share that humbly. Um, and thinking about it, this might be the hardest questions. Like, what do I want folks to know about me outside of my job role? Sometimes I focus so much on work and my roles and centering kind of around that sometimes I forget that I exist outside of that.
Yeah.
And so I do feel though that I'm very passionate about serving children and families in the best way possible. And I have felt that way since I was a young child.
Yeah. But who are you just as a person? Because SHARP is all about bringing humanity back into the work. So, who is Rachel outside of her work identity?
Sometimes that's hard to disconnect as director. But outside of work, I'm still somebody who cares truly about others.
Mm.
Um, I have 5 children. Three are grown adults that are bonus children through marriage, who are adults that are thriving and living their best life in Tennessee. And then I have 2 biological children, one in high school and one in middle school. And so parenting for me looks different than it did 10 years ago. Um, as now I have humans with opinions who are not afraid to share them. And I have no idea where they got that from.
Definitely not you at all. I can imagine. Well, thanks for sharing a little bit about your family, as I know that like our personal selves influence our professional selves. Like that's just we can't get away from that. But it's important to know sort of where we're each starting from so that we can connect on a more deeper level. So thank you for that. So I know you kind of got a little bit to it, but what do you think is important for folks to understand about the mission and purpose of the Department of Social Services?
So, our mission really centers around helping build stronger, safer, more self sufficient families and adults. Um, I think DSS has a negative connotation with it often when people hear. Um, but truly, I can tell you that in Arundel County Department of Social Services, we're trying really hard to improve. We're trying to meet families and adults like where they are. And there are so many different programs and services that we have to offer and that we even look at revamping as life evolves and changes.
Yeah.
And we truly are here when life happens and folks may not have a safety net to fall on.
Yeah. So you're just like a resource when folks need it.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that you have been able to critically like examine and sort of think through some of these things in such a position of power. So we'll get into some of that today, which I'm excited about. So why did Anne Arundel County leadership initially choose to train staff on the SHARP framework? What were you thinking were the goals and how have they shifted over time?
So this vision began with our former director, Carnitra White, and she really wanted us to look at how we were serving families and wanted us to serve families in a better way that would lead to better outcomes for children and families. And as we have undergone sharp workshops and technical assistance and reflecting, um, those goals are still the same, but things have really shifted as we have learned so much about ourselves that we've got a lot of internal work to do, each of
Mm,
us, myself included. And that sometimes is the hardest work of all, to really be able to look at your own biases, acknowledge them, and then figure out how do we grow, how do we move forward, and how do we treat one another in a way that is more humanistic than the rest of our society. How do we do that internally? And then how do we serve our children and families better?
yeah. So the goals are really for improvements at every piece, right? Internally, externally, and sort of where they meet in between. That we are holistic agencies, and so we have to be well in order to think about sort of well-being in the community. So I appreciate that sort of reflection, because sometimes we are a little quick to give ourselves the pass, right? That we're good, and so what can we do to the community, or but we have to think about what are we doing internally so that we can make shifts in the community. So I appreciate that. As a leader of an agency with competing demands, why do you feel it's important to continue this work?
I think that it's important to continue this work. Um, it's really urgent. Our children and families, they need the best support available to them, but they need what it is that they individually need. When I think back to my early career days in my early 20s, having the best intentions, but not really reflecting on myself and what I was bringing to the work, I cringe a little inside.
Mm.
And then, many years later, we won't say how many, to age myself, but being able to reflect now and then think about my own personal experiences in life and as a parent, and what those experiences bring to the table and where children and families are. It is so important that we meet them where they are, rather than just coming at people saying, here's what we have, here's what you need. Instead, just kind of maybe starting with, how are you doing?
Mm, yeah, but sometimes it's the simple things that make all the difference, and I really appreciate that sort of understanding and the transformation of your thinking. So, and Sharp is really about that piece, right? Of all levels, like you named it, like the personal, and then how that shows up with the professional, and sort of even shifting both of those things to the political. But change is not instant or easy. So I am curious, since starting implementation in 2023, what changes have you experienced personally, and what changes have you been able to see at your agency?
I will echo that change is not easy. And some days it feels like you're just kind of spinning your wheels. Um, we've really changed in trying our best to slow down a minute, to reflect on what we're really seeing here. What is this family experiencing? What are we experiencing? Whose motive and whose goal is this?
Mm,
And we look at this, and we're working to look at this throughout all processes. So when it comes to onboarding and bringing new employees to the agency, the interview process, and examining like where folks land with diversity, equity, and inclusion.
mm,
Um, where are there maybe some biases? How will they work through them? Embedding them in policy and practice, and even at the executive level, our executive team, having brave, open conversations about race, racism, culture, and most important, inclusion. And how do we make this a place where everyone belongs?
mm. Yeah. So you're really thinking it through in terms of like embedding it fully, and like the changes. Sorry, you're able to name them, but I'm sure that there are plenty more things to work on. But I just want
Oh,
to honor that you have started. But sometimes getting started is the hardest part. But you are really trying to critically examine and think it through, which I know is hard when sort of an agency has been one way for such a long time. And so I just applaud the efforts that you all are making. Um, and really, this is a journey. The anti-racism is a journey. I'm still on it. I know that I could speak for all of the Sharp team, that we're all still on it, and sort of everyone we enter into partnership with is with that understanding. So what are your next steps, and what are the next steps for Anne Arundel County Department of Social Services?
wow. So it seems like next steps are always unfolding.
Mm,
Um, like we have a one plan, an idea in mind, and we move forward, and it's like, oops, that didn't work so well. How could we maybe adjust? Or where do we need to have deeper conversations? How do we need to have braver spaces for difficult conversations that we need to have with each other, to be able to call one another out or maybe call folks in so that we can work with our families in the best possible way. And I think our next steps are just continuing this journey together and making sure that we are all together on this journey. And those who may not be with us yet on the
Mm,
journey, helping them to kind of figure out where they may land.
right. So it's keeping the conversation going, sort of eliciting that feedback and that creativity from all the folks, because I know you're not the only person sort of advancing this right now. I'm really excited about your diversity and equity inclusion sort of committee, and all the leaders that are sort of the early adopters and are advancing this work from your actual leadership positions, but those who are maybe in the workforce. It's kind of cool to see the coalition building and sort of the ongoing process, because sometimes the next steps aren't so clear and easy. But it's nice to know that you are committed to it, whatever that looks like and how it unfolds, and many different directions, I'm sure. Because this is what we like to say is lifetime work. We invite folks to the movement. And so we are grateful that you are on that sort of movement with us.
Thank you. But we have an amazing team at Anne
Yeah.
Arundel County Department of Social Services. We have frontline workers who are very dedicated and passionate in this work, and they bring what they've learned from school about SHARP into their work with families, into when they're doing planning and goal setting with families. We also have a DEI committee that is staff-led, staff-driven, where they give recommendations, and we've tried out their recommendations and learned so much from it. And we also have a public information officer that helps with writing messages and being thoughtful in the messages that we write and who we're sending those messages to.
I appreciate that. Yeah. It's like we all have to, like, as you said earlier, sort of pause and reflect and sort of what we're doing and the impact that that has, even down to our messaging and strategies, and partnering with families on service plans and all of that. That it takes a full sort of team approach to it. So, and I can already hear a little bit of the lessons that you've learned on this anti-racism journey. But what would you want others to know about the impact of the SHARP framework training and the process of becoming an anti-racist, anti-oppressive agency?
Hmm. So I will say, for folks that may find themselves similar to me, where you're like, okay, these are the steps I need to take, and this is what's going to happen in life, right? It doesn't really happen quite like that, and neither does life. It really is a journey, and it isn't linear. It isn't just circular. It has so many paths to it. And some days are really good and other days are really hard. And I think it's finding your people, it's finding support, and knowing that you aren't alone.
Yeah. Yeah. That's where the power piece comes in. It's like, what can you do alone, but what can you do with others? And so, you as an agency or as an agency leader are finding your people and building your coalitions, but also you're sort of joining this wider network of folks that want to do this work and want to do it well, and are seeking transformation on all those levels. So thank you so much for your time and your heart for this work, and for speaking with us about your experience. I really appreciate you.
I really appreciate you and the Center for Restorative Change. Thank you so much for all the support that you have provided to us in Anne Arundel County. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. All righty.